A young nurse saved the life of a little girl having seizures in the park, unaware that her parents are multi-billionaires. Benita had just gotten off a long shift at the hospital and was heading home, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. As she walked through the city park, the soft rustling of leaves and the chatter of children playing made her slow her steps. She spotted a large tree with wide branches and decided to rest beneath it. The breeze felt great on her skin, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. The air was cool against her flushed cheeks, a welcome relief after the relentless pace of the day. Benita's legs throbbed, her muscles tight from hours of standing and moving through crowded hospital halls. Her nurse's uniform was wrinkled and clung uncomfortably to her damp skin, a reminder of the chaos she'd just left behind. The sounds of the park, the distant chatter of children, the rustling of the wind through the leaves, the rhythmic pounding of a jogger's feet on the pavement, wrapped around her like a soothing lullaby. For the first time all day, she felt her shoulders relax. Her head tilted back, resting against the rough bark of the tree. She sighed deeply, her chest rising and falling as the tension in her body slowly unraveled. Her mind drifted through the day's events, the patients' faces, the hurried medical decisions, the weight of being the person everyone turned to in moments of panic. It had been a hard day, harder than most, and she knew there would be more like it. But right now, beneath this tree, with the cool evening air brushing against her skin, none of it mattered. Suddenly, frantic screams pierced the calm. Benita's eyes shot open, her pulse spiking instantly. The peaceful hum of the park was gone, replaced by shrill cries and the frantic murmur of a growing crowd. Without hesitation, Benita sprang to her feet, her exhaustion forgotten. Her eyes darted toward the playground, where a small circle of people had formed. Panic crackled through the air. Her heart hammered as she pushed through the crowd. "Excuse me, let me through," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. The crowd parted, and that's when she saw the little girl. The child was small, no more than 6 or 7 years old, her tiny body convulsing violently on the ground. Her arms and legs jerked uncontrollably, her back arching unnaturally as her mouth foamed slightly. Her face was pale, her eyes rolled back, and her breathing was ragged and shallow. Benita dropped to her knees beside the girl without a second thought. Her medical training kicked in like muscle memory, overriding the initial burst of fear. "I'm a nurse," she said loudly, hoping to calm the growing panic in the crowd. "Give me space. I need room to help her." She quickly assessed the situation. A seizure. Likely epileptic. But the foam at the mouth and the girl's struggling breath told her it was a serious one. Time was critical. With steady hands, Benita gently turned the girl onto her side, the safest position to prevent choking if the child vomited. She pulled off her sweater and slid it beneath the girl's head to cushion it from the hard ground. The girl's small frame trembled beneath her touch. Benita placed one hand on the girl's arm, her grip light but firm enough to keep her from thrashing uncontrollably. "You're okay," Benita whispered softly, even though she knew the girl couldn't hear her. Her voice was steady, calm, the same tone she used with panicked patients in the ER. "You're not alone. You're safe." The girl's breathing was shallow, erratic. Benita brushed back the damp strands of hair sticking to the girl's forehead and carefully monitored her pulse. It was fast and weak, too weak. She could feel the child's heart racing beneath her fragile skin. "How long has this been happening?" Benita asked urgently, glancing toward the stunned crowd. A man stepped forward, wide-eyed and trembling. "A minute, maybe 2, I don't know." She was fine, and then she just collapsed. Benita nodded sharply. "Call an ambulance," she instructed. "Now." The man fumbled for his phone and began dialing as Benita turned her attention back to the girl. The seizure hadn't stopped, it was lasting too long. A dangerous sign. Benita leaned in closer, her hand resting gently on the girl's chest, feeling the erratic rise and fall of her shallow breaths. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "Stay with me." The girl's small hand twitched, her fingers curling toward Benita's arm. Her breathing hitched, and for a terrifying moment, Benita thought it might stop altogether. "No, no, no," Benita whispered. She adjusted the girl's position slightly, tilting her head back to keep her airway open. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She couldn't let this little girl slip away. Gradually, the violent shaking began to ease. The girl's limbs trembled, then stilled. Her breathing evened out, though it remained shallow. Benita watched her carefully, waiting for any sign of distress. The crowd hovered nearby, holding their breath as the tension in the air thickened. A soft whimper escaped the girl's lips, her eyelids fluttering. "That's it," Benita whispered, stroking the girl's hair. "You're doing so well. Just breathe." The girl's eyes slowly opened, glazed and unfocused. Benita smiled reassuringly. "You're safe now," she said softly. "Just keep breathing." Moments later, the wail of sirens cut through the air. A team of paramedics rushed onto the scene, and Benita moved aside as they took over. One of the paramedics, a young man with a kind face, knelt beside her. "You did good," he said, his voice low. Benita nodded, the adrenaline beginning to fade as the weight of what had just happened settled over her. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped her palms against her thighs. The girl's parents, a well-dressed couple with tears streaming down their cheeks, rushed toward their daughter. The mother dropped to her knees, clutching the girl's face in her hands. "She's okay," Benita said gently. "She's going to be okay." The father turned to her, his face etched with gratitude. "You saved her life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much." The mother stood, tears shining in her eyes. "What's your name?" "Benita," she replied softly. "Please, give us your number," the father insisted. "We need to thank you properly." Benita hesitated but saw the sincerity in their eyes. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. The father took it with shaking hands. The paramedics lifted the girl onto a stretcher, securing her with careful hands. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, the girl's small hand reached toward Benita. Benita leaned down, brushing her fingers against the girl's hand. "You're okay," she whispered one last time. The ambulance doors closed, and the sirens faded into the distance. Benita stood there, her heart still pounding in her chest. The crowd began to disperse, murmurs of relief and awe drifting through the air. Benita's knees felt weak. She sat back beneath the tree, pressing her hand to her chest. Her breathing slowed. The cool breeze brushed across her face again. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This time, she let herself feel the calm. Benita woke the next morning feeling the lingering weight of exhaustion from the day before, but beneath it, a strange sense of calm. She stretched beneath the thin covers of her small apartment bed, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and painting warm stripes across the worn wooden floor. Her mind drifted back to the park. To the frantic screams, the trembling body of the little girl, the steady sound of her own voice calming the chaos. She had acted instinctively, her training kicking in without hesitation. But still, the image of the girl's pale face and fragile frame haunted her. She rolled over and checked her phone. A missed call and a voicemail. Curiosity stirred in her chest as she pressed play. "Hello, this is Mr. Reynolds. I hope you remember me. You saved our daughter yesterday. My wife and I would really like to thank you properly. Please give us a call back when you have a moment." Benita sat up, her heart racing. Mr. Reynolds, the little girl's father. She hadn't thought much about the parents in the moment, only the girl. She had spoken to them briefly after the ambulance left, but everything had been a blur. She certainly hadn't expected them to track her down. Her thumb hovered over the callback button. A part of her hesitated. Why would they want to see her? She had done what any nurse would have done. But another part of her was curious, so she pressed the button and held the phone to her ear. The call was answered almost immediately. "Benita." Mr. Reynolds's voice was warm and eager. "Thank you for calling back." "Of course," Benita said, still unsure where this was going. "My wife and I were wondering if you'd come by our home this afternoon. We'd really like to speak with you in person." Benita hesitated. "That's really not necessary. I'm just glad your daughter is okay." "It would mean a lot to us," Mr. Reynolds said, his tone soft but insistent. After a pause, Benita sighed. "Okay, sure. Wonderful. I'll text you the address. We'll see you at 3. Benita hung up, her brows furrowed. This was strange, but her curiosity was piqued now. A few hours later, Benita stood at the entrance of a long, winding driveway, her mouth slightly open as she stared at the mansion in front of her. Tall iron gates stretched skyward, adorned with ornate gold accents. Beyond the gates, a paved path curled through a lush garden lined with sculpted hedges and vibrant flowers in shades of deep red and soft cream. The mansion itself was a towering white estate, framed by marble pillars and wide balconies. Large windows with gold trim reflected the sun's glow, making the house look almost ethereal against the clear blue sky. Benita took a steadying breath. She adjusted her simple blouse and jeans, suddenly feeling underdressed and out of place. As if sensing her arrival, the gates began to open with a soft hum. A man in a tailored black suit emerged from the side, giving her a polite nod. "Miss Benita?" "Yes," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "Right this way." The butler led her down the driveway and through the massive double doors that opened into an entryway, so grand it made Benita feel like she'd stepped into a palace. Crystal chandeliers dangled from vaulted ceilings. Polished marble floors gleamed under the light, and the walls were lined with enormous paintings, classical portraits, and abstract pieces, each one more impressive than the last. The air was cool and faintly scented with fresh roses. "Please wait here," the butler said, guiding her toward a sunlit sitting room. Benita perched on the edge of an antique couch, her hands folded in her lap. She glanced around, trying to avoid looking too wide-eyed. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a nearby side table, next to a vase overflowing with white lilies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a manicured lawn, where a marble fountain bubbled softly. "Benita," she turned as Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds entered the room. They were both tall and impeccably dressed. Mr. Reynolds wore a navy blue suit, his salt and pepper hair combed back neatly. Mrs. Reynolds was elegant in a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored pants, her honey blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Despite their polished appearances, their smiles were warm. "Thank you so much for coming," Mrs. Reynolds said, crossing the room and taking Benita's hands in hers. Her eyes were glassy with emotion. "We've been thinking about you nonstop since yesterday." Benita smiled faintly. "I'm just glad she's okay." "Because of you," Mr. Reynolds said firmly. "You saved her life." Benita shook her head. "I was just doing my job." "No," Mrs. Reynolds insisted. "You didn't have to help her. You could have walked away, but you didn't." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, carrying a small, white envelope on a silver tray. He handed it to Mr. Reynolds, who took it carefully. "We wanted to show you how grateful we are," Mr. Reynolds said, extending the envelope toward Benita. Benita's brow creased as she took the envelope hesitantly. "This really isn't necessary, please," Mrs. Reynolds said softly. "Just open it." Benita's fingers trembled slightly as she peeled back the flap. Inside was a check, a large one. Her eyes widened as she registered the number. $200,000, she whispered, her mouth dry. "Yes," Mr. Reynolds said. "It's a small token of appreciation." Benita's head shot up. "Small?" Mrs. Reynolds smiled. "It's nothing compared to what you gave us. Our daughter's life is priceless." Benita shook her head, her heart racing. I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Mr. Reynolds said firmly. "You deserve it." Tears pricked the corners of Benita's eyes. She had spent most of her adult life living paycheck to paycheck, taking double shifts to pay off her nursing school debt, skipping meals to make rent. This check, it could change everything. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Mrs. Reynolds said. Benita sat back, her mind spinning. Slowly, her fingers closed around the envelope. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means more than you know." Mr. Reynolds smiled. "It's us who should be thanking you." Mrs. Reynolds stepped closer and touched Benita's hand. "What are you going to do with it?" Benita's eyes softened. "Pay off my student loans, for starters." A smile tugged at her lips. "And maybe take a vacation." "You deserve it," Mr. Reynolds said with a warm smile. Benita stood, still clutching the envelope. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Mrs. Reynolds said. Benita left the mansion with her heart still thudding against her chest. The sun was starting to set as she walked down the long driveway, the crisp envelope tucked safely in her purse. The air felt lighter, the breeze softer. She thought of the girl's small hand clutching hers, of the relief in Mr. Reynolds' voice when he said, "You saved her life." Benita smiled to herself as she stepped back onto the sidewalk. Her life had just changed, but somehow it felt like the beginning of something even greater. Benita sat on her small, slightly worn couch in her tiny apartment, the glow of the single lamp in the corner casting soft shadows on the faded walls. The check trembled in her hands as her eyes darted between the paper and the cracks in the ceiling. $200,000. The number stared back at her like it was written in another language, a language that didn't belong in her world. Her chest tightened as a wave of disbelief swept over her. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the ink numbers and the elegant signature at the bottom. Slowly, her breath quickened until it hitched in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her trembling fingers brushed over the paper again as if it might disappear if she wasn't careful. It didn't feel real. The polished marble floors, the sparkling chandeliers, the warm expressions on the faces of Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds as they handed her the envelope, all of it felt like some surreal dream. A choked laugh escaped her as the tears spilled over her cheeks. She swiped at them with the sleeve of her old hoodie, but more kept coming. Her phone lay on the arm of the couch. She grabbed it and dialed without thinking. "Hello?" "Claire." Benita's voice cracked as her best friend's familiar voice came through the line. "Benita? Hey, are you okay?" I don't know." Benita let out a watery laugh. I think I just became rich." "What?" Claire's voice sharpened. "What are you talking about?" Benita swallowed hard. "Remember the little girl I told you about? The one who had the seizure in the park?" "Yeah. Well, her parents tracked me down and invited me to their house today. Claire, they live in a freaking mansion, like, out of a movie." A butler answered the door. "No way." "Oh, it gets better." Benita's laugh was edged with disbelief. "They gave me a check." "Claire, a check for $200,000. There was a stunned pause on the other end of the line. "Are you kidding me? I'm looking at it right now." "Benita." Claire's scream nearly blew out the speaker. "Oh my God. How are you serious?" "I know," Benita said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I don't know what to do." "Girl, you're going to pay off those stupid loans. That's what you're going to do. You can finally breathe." Benita's eyes fluttered closed as Claire's words sank in. For years, she'd felt like she was drowning, suffocated by the weight of her student debt, the endless hospital shifts, the pressure to keep going no matter how exhausted she felt. Now, for the first time, it felt like someone had thrown her a lifeline. "You deserve this," Claire said, her voice gentler now. "Benita, you saved that little girl's life. This is karma finally working in your favor." Benita let out a shaky breath. I never expected anything. I was just doing my job." "You went above and beyond, Benita. Not everyone would have known what to do or acted so fast." Benita smiled through her tears. "Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely." Claire's voice was warm. "So, what's next?" Benita's eyes drifted to the framed photo on the shelf across the room, her nursing school graduation picture. She stood in the center of the frame, clutching her diploma, beaming with pride despite the dark circles under her eyes. Her parents had been gone by then, and she'd worked 2 jobs to cover tuition. That diploma had felt like the weight of the world in her hands, proof that she had fought, struggled, and survived. But survival had come at a cost. The long shifts, the missed meals, the nights crying from exhaustion. She'd endured it all for the sake of others. "I think I'm going to pay off my loans," Benita said softly. "And then, maybe figure out what it feels like to breathe without worrying about the next paycheck." "Yes," Claire cheered. "And you should take a vacation. Somewhere warm. You deserve it." Benita smiled. "Maybe." They talked for a while longer until Benita's voice grew tired. After hanging up, she sat back on the couch, the silence pressing in around her. The check was still in her hand. Slowly, she set it on the coffee table in front of her and curled her legs up beneath her. Her gaze drifted back to the photo on the shelf. Memories stirred, late nights studying under the flickering light of her desk lamp, the sound of her alarm blaring before dawn, the rush of adrenaline every time she stepped onto the hospital floor. Her mind flashed to the park, the way the girl's small body had trembled beneath her hands, the terror in the parents' voices, the relief when the girl had finally opened her eyes. The money was incredible, life-changing. But the feeling that had settled in her chest when the girl's breathing steadied beneath her hands, that was priceless. Benita rubbed her tired eyes and stood. She crossed the room and picked up the framed photo from the shelf. Her reflection hovered faintly behind the glass. The same tired eyes, the same determined expression. She thought about all the times she'd doubted herself, the moments she'd wondered if the struggle was worth it, if her work even mattered. But that little girl's life was proof that it did. Benita pressed the photo to her chest and let out a long breath. Gratitude washed over her, mixing with relief and a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had been given a gift, not just the money, but the confirmation that her work, her training, her sacrifices, they had meant something. She walked back to the couch and sat down, tucking her legs beneath her. Her gaze lingered on the check for a moment before she reached for it again. Her fingers brushed over the paper, but this time, the weight of it didn't feel so overwhelming. Because for the first time in a long time, Benita felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She smiled to herself and whispered, "I did it." And for the first time, she believed it. The next morning, Benita stood outside the bank, clutching a slim folder in her hands. The early sunlight bathed the city streets in a soft golden glow, but her heart was racing. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself before stepping through the sleek glass doors. The cool air inside the bank contrasted with the warmth outside. She approached the teller's desk with cautious confidence, her heart pounding as if she were about to perform a complex surgery rather than hand over a check. "How can I help you today?" the teller asked with a polite smile. Benita opened the folder and carefully slid the check across the counter. "I'd like to pay off my student loans," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The teller's eyes widened at the figure on the check. "All of it?" "Yes." The teller typed rapidly into her computer, occasionally glancing at the check with a raised eyebrow. Benita's fingers curled tightly against the cool marble of the counter. She had spent years haunted by the looming weight of her debt, the constant pressure of repayment plans, the sleepless nights wondering if she'd ever be free from it. A moment later, the teller's eyes lifted to meet hers. "It's done." Benita's breath hitched. "It's done?" "Yes." The teller smiled. "Your balance is 0. Benita's knees nearly buckled. Relief surged through her veins, and she pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. For the first time in years, the financial burden that had been her shadow was gone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. As she walked out of the bank, the bright sunlight hit her face, and she tilted her head toward the sky. Her chest felt light, like she could float away if the breeze caught her just right. She had spent so long surviving, always pushing forward through exhaustion and uncertainty. Now, for the first time, she felt like she could truly breathe. That afternoon, Benita sat at a quiet table in a sunlit garden at one of the city's finest restaurants. The girl's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, sat across from her, their expressions warm and welcoming. Their daughter, Lily, sat between them, her cheeks rosy and her eyes bright with health. "We can't thank you enough, Benita," Mrs. Reynolds said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. If you hadn't been there that day, her voice trailed off, emotion tightening her throat. Benita squeezed her hand gently. "I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time." "But that's exactly it," Mr. Reynolds said, leaning forward. "Not only did you know what to do, you acted without hesitation. That kind of instinct and compassion isn't something you can teach." Benita smiled, feeling a familiar warmth in her chest. "I guess nursing just becomes part of you after a while. That's why we wanted to speak with you today," Mr. Reynolds continued. His gaze was steady and serious. "My wife and I run a medical foundation. We're currently building a new state-of-the-art facility focused on emergency care and community outreach. We want you to join us." Benita's eyes widened. "Join you? We need someone with your expertise and heart," Mrs. Reynolds said. "We've seen how you work under pressure, how you care about people. That's exactly the kind of person we want leading this initiative." Benita's mouth opened, but no words came out. The offer was staggering, not just a job, but the chance to shape something meaningful, to help people on a much larger scale. "We understand if you need time to think about it," Mr. Reynolds added. "But we really hope you'll consider it." Benita glanced at Lily, who smiled shyly at her. Her mind spun with the possibilities. She had become a nurse because she wanted to make a difference, to heal and comfort people when they were at their most vulnerable. This could be a way to reach even more lives, to create a legacy of care that extended far beyond the hospital walls. Benita hesitated, her heart thudding in her chest. "I don't think I need time to think about it." Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds exchanged surprised glances. "I'd be honored," Benita said, her voice steady. "To be part of something like this, to give back, that's all I've ever wanted." Mr. Reynolds' face broke into a wide smile. Mrs. Reynolds clasped her hands together, her eyes shining with relief and joy. "You're making the right choice," Mrs. Reynolds said softly. Benita felt a weight lift off her shoulders, not just the weight of debt, but the uncertainty about her future. For the first time, she wasn't walking blindly toward the next paycheck or the next long shift. She was walking towards something bigger, something with purpose. As they finished lunch, Benita watched Lily play with the flowers lining the edge of the garden. The little girl caught her eye and smiled brightly. "You're my hero," Lily said softly. Benita's heart swelled. She smiled back and said, No, Lily, you're mine. Later that night, as Benita lay in bed, her mind buzzed with the events of the day. She had paid off her loans. She had been offered a new career path. But more than that, she had found clarity, a sense of direction that had eluded her for so long. She glanced toward the framed graduation photo on her nightstand. The girl in that picture had been tired, uncertain, and scared. But now, Benita was stepping into a new chapter with confidence and grace. She smiled to herself, feeling the quiet hum of hope in her chest. Tomorrow was a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, she couldn't wait to see where it would lead. Months had passed, but for Benita, it felt like a lifetime ago that her world had shifted so dramatically. Now, she stood in the gleaming hallway of the new medical foundation, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The polished tile beneath her feet reflected the bright overhead lights, and the air buzzed with quiet activity, the sounds of patients being cared for and lives being changed. Benita adjusted the sleeve of her crisp white lab coat, the fabric smooth and clean against her skin. Her name badge gleamed beneath the soft lights. Benita Adams, Senior Medical Specialist. Even now, seeing that title still made her heart skip a beat. "All right, listen up," she said, turning toward the small group of young nurses standing before her. Their eyes were wide with nervous anticipation, exactly how she had once felt. "There's one thing you need to remember," Benita said, her voice steady but warm. "Your training will get you far, but when it comes down to it, when you're standing at someone's bedside and the seconds matter, you have to trust your instincts." One of the young nurses, a red-haired girl with freckles, raised her hand. "What if we're wrong?" Benita smiled gently. "Sometimes you will be. That's part of learning. But you can't hesitate because of fear. Fear won't save a life, action will." The nurses nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Benita saw herself in them. The same uncertainty, the same quiet hope that they could make a difference. As the nurses dispersed, Benita stood for a moment, taking it all in. The foundation had become more than just a place of work. It was a symbol of the life she had built, a life she never imagined could be this full. She had gone from surviving to thriving, from a nurse scraping by to a leader guiding others. Just then, the sound of small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Benita turned, and her heart swelled. "Benita!" Lily's bright voice rang out as the little girl rushed toward her, her blonde hair bouncing with each step. Benita crouched down just in time for Lily to throw her arms around her neck. Benita's breath hitched as Lily's small arms wrapped tightly around her. "Hey, sweetheart," Benita whispered, holding her close. Lily pulled back, her blue eyes shining. "I missed you." Benita brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I missed you too." Behind Lily, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds stood arm in arm, smiling warmly. Mrs. Reynolds' eyes glistened with quiet emotion as she watched her daughter and Benita together. "She's doing so well," Mr. Reynolds said. "All thanks to you." Benita shook her head. "You give me too much credit." Mrs. Reynolds stepped forward. "No, Benita. You saved her life. That's not something we'll ever forget." Benita smiled, her throat tightening. She glanced at Lily, who was now playing with the hem of Benita's lab coat. "Are you going to be a doctor one day?" Benita teased. Lily grinned. "Maybe. Well, if you do, you'll be amazing." Lily beamed and hugged Benita again. Benita squeezed her eyes shut, holding on to the moment, the weight of Lily's small body against her, the warmth of her arms. It reminded her why she had chosen this path in the first place, to heal, to comfort, to make a difference. "Come on, sweetheart," Mrs. Reynolds said softly. "We don't want to keep Benita from her work." Lily reluctantly let go and skipped back to her parents. Mrs. Reynolds smiled, and Mr. Reynolds gave Benita a nod of quiet gratitude. "We'll see you soon," Mr. Reynolds said. Benita watched them walk down the hallway, Lily's small hand tucked in her mother's grasp. As they disappeared around the corner, Benita stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the city. The sky was painted with hues of amber and rose as the sun began to set. The city lights twinkled beneath the soft glow of dusk, and the streets below buzzed with life. Benita pressed her palm against the cool glass. A quiet sense of peace settled over her, not the frantic rush of saving lives, not the constant pressure of survival, but peace born from knowing she had found her purpose. Months ago, she had been drowning under the weight of exhaustion and debt. Now, she was standing tall, her life changed not just by the gift she had received, but by the life she had saved and the lives she would continue to touch. Benita smiled to herself. The road ahead was long, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She knew exactly who she was and what she was meant to do. As the last light of the sun slipped below the horizon, Benita turned away from the window, ready to face whatever came next.